Hello Booktube! Today we are doing my February reading wrap-up. Now if you watched my February TBR, you'll know that I had really high ambitions for reading this month, and I'll admit it was probably a little over-ambitious. I did not read everything on my TBR. I read a lot of things that weren't on my TBR, but it is what it is. And I will say that for the most part I really enjoyed everything I read in February, so I can't complain. After a very slow start to the month, the first thing I finished was City of Glass by Cassandra Clare. This is the third book in the Mortal Instrument series, which I have been trying to not finish because there's 3 more books after this one that I have no intention of reading. But I wanted to finish the first 3 books because I own them, and that's really it. I liked this book a little bit more than the second book. I thought the last 100 pages were pretty interesting. Pretty good action-packed, but this is over 500 pages, and so the first 400 pages really weren't that great. I think what pains me about this series the most is that it's a really cool idea. The concept of shadow hunters is really interesting, but the writing is really obnoxious. Cassandra Clare has a lot of author tics that are just really jarring and really annoying to read several thousand pages of. So, am I glad I read this? Will I read anything else by her? No. It doesn't work for me. Though I can see why some people find it really entertaining because the world is interesting. I think I gave this 3 stars max. It was either 2.5 or 3 stars. The next couple of things I read were all graphic novels. So on February 18th, I participated in a readathon called Let's Get Graphic, which was a day dedicated to reading graphic novels. I did not come into February expecting to participate in this, but I heard about it about a week before it started, and I was like, you know what? I've got 2 graphic novels on my shelf that I have been meaning to read for a couple of years, so why not just take this opportunity to read those 2, plus a few others from the library that just sound really great, and that's what I did. And I'm actually really glad I participated because I read 5 graphic novels for this readathon, and they were all fantastic. The first thing I read for the readathon was actually a reread, and that was Whiteout by Greg Rucka. And I read this a few years ago for a class. Loved it then, loved it now. The art style is very, I don't know, I don't want to call it basic because there's a ton of detail work, but it is just black and white. This duology is about a U.S. Marshal who's stationed in Antarctica, basically because her bosses don't like her. She killed a man who she had in custody, and her punishment was to get reassigned to Antarctica. And this first one is very much a mystery novel. It's a whodunit. They find a dead body, and she has to find out who killed him. And it's great. The second one continues, same protagonist, same U.S. Marshal, still stationed in Antarctica, only there's been an explosion at a Russian science station, and a lot of nuclear materials are missing, and she's tasked with discovering who stole the nuclear material and recovering it, and if she does, that'll be her ticket off Antarctica. And so this one is not so much a whodunit, it's a little bit more thrillery. Still great. This one is much more focused on man versus environment. The idea is that Carrie versus Antarctica, and I really love that. The way Rucka brings the ice and Antarctica to life is harsh and unforgiving, and absolutely the sort of thing that I love about these graphic novels. I gave both of these a 5 star. After that, I picked up a very famous first book in a series, and that's Saga Volume 1. Everyone's read this, I think. Everyone talks about it, and I can see why. The art is real stunning, just gorgeous and expressive. The story is interesting. I really liked the main story, which the main character story, which is the mother and the father. And I really liked there's an android prince who's pursuing them. He's rather funny, and what he's doing is rather funny as he pursues them. I'm not a huge fan of the bounty hunter storyline, though I did like it better in the second one, so I will definitely be continuing. After that, I read the second volume and really enjoyed this one. Same bright, evocative palette, really action-packed. I don't know. It was fun. I've heard that there's a little bit of an issue. There's some problematic content in one of the later issues regarding trans representation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is something that I heard talked about this past year, and I want to say it's in volume 6, but I might be wrong about that. For the moment, I do plan on continuing this. I'll probably hopefully pick up the next 2 volumes maybe in March, maybe in April. As it is, this was fun. And then the last thing I read for the graphic novel read along was Monstrous Volume 1, and this was stunning. This was my jam. This is like totally the sort of story that I like, and the art is very much the kind of art I love. It's very like watercolor. There's a ton of really gorgeous detail, and the story is really interesting as well. The detail is really fantastic. This reminded me of several things. There are notes of hermetics, and it gave me, the story itself gave me very strong Cthulhu slash Dune vibes with a little bit of Final Fantasy. There's certain things in here that kind of remind me of the Genova storyline from Final Fantasy. Basically, it's a fantasy land, fantasy world, where there are several different races, and they're all right now they're all in conflict with one another. So your two primary antagonists are the humans and the Arcanics. And then there's this race of ancients who apparently bred with humans to make the Arcanics. So because of that, there's something about the Arcanic blood which is like magic, and there is a female religious sect amongst humans who have kind of seized power and found a way to extract that magic from dead Arcanics. So, and that female religious sect and what they do and how they control society is what really puts me in a mind of the Bene Gesserit from Dune. This opens with our protagonist, who's an Arcanic, infiltrating the religious sect because she's seeking information about her past, essentially. And we see just how kind of depraved and gruesome the human world is. Like they buy Arcanics and they harvest their body parts to extract the magic stuff from them. There's a lot of body amputation, like limb amputation. There's a lot of life sucking that happens in this. So if you don't like things that are a little gruesome and a little uncomfortable, you might not like this. But if you like complicated stories, you like really rich, obviously deep, like well thought out fantasy lands, I think this is great. It's really beautiful. I can't wait to read more because this story kind of answered some questions, but not a whole lot was answered. It was a lot of like the character looking for answers and only finding more questions. It was great. And then the last thing I read this month was for my Jane Austen read along. And so in February, we were reading Northanger Abbey, which I was not expecting to like. And I literally just finished this right before filming this video. I usually say Mansfield Park is my least favorite, and then I would put this book as my second least favorite. And I guess I might have to still do that because I'm pretty sure I like Sense and Sensibility more than this one. But I originally had this rated on Goodreads with 2 stars, and I bumped it up to 4 stars after the second read through because for the most part, it was a lot better than I remembered it. It was a lot of fun. I laughed out loud at several places. I tabbed out a few places because this one is really interesting. It is a commentary on society and family life, but it's also very much a satire on kind of gothic heroine novels. And it's funny, it's charming, it's Austen. One of the reasons I bumped this up, too, is that I really enjoyed the characters a lot more the second time around. In my head, I've never really liked Catherine Morland. I've always thought she was just ridiculous. And she's silly, but she's also, I think, except for maybe Fanny Price, I don't remember how old she is. And I think she's fairly young, too. Catherine's probably Austen's youngest protagonist. And so some of the silliness and some of her susceptibility to being bossed around, is understandable because she's 17. She's significantly younger than everyone else around her. And also, she stands up for herself better than I remembered. And God, I hate the Thorpes. And maybe it's weird to say I bumped up this rating because of how much I disliked some characters, but when you're supposed to dislike certain characters, and you really, really do, the author is doing something right. Not because they're like evil, but they're just like, oh, they're people you can't stand, and they're people that we have all met. And that's one of the great things about Austen is like her characters are so they're people you know. They might be you, they might be your family, they might be your friends, they might be people you go to college with. You have met these people. And so yeah, it's fun. The end definitely wraps up a little too quickly, and I will say I wish there was more about Eleanor Tilney. Her character definitely is underserved in this book, but I believe this is Austen's first novel, so and because it feels like it definitely feels like a debut novel, but I still enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Not as many pages read this month as I had planned to read, but for the most part it was a really good reading month. I won't lie. I've been reading a lot of fan fiction this month. But reading is reading, and I've read a lot of really great things, even if they weren't novels, so no shame! Let me know if you read any of these things, or if you're planning to in the future, and I'll see you guys all very soon. Bye!